my God.
Welcome, everybody.
Oh, my God.
Welcome back to Love or Die, our first podcast of the year. Happy New Year, everyone. And welcome, Mark, and welcome, Andrew.
Hello, welcome, good people. Happy New Year.
Welcome, 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 welcome. Yay. So thank you, Lirazi. And Lirazi and I have been studying together, I think, for a decade. It's been a decade of deep, intensive study. And so Lirazi is a deep lineage holder, right, in this unfolding lineage of Solomon, this new story of value, this CosmoErotic Humanism. And Andrew, we are madly delighted to be talking to you. I just want to invite everyone. I'm in the Northeast Kingdom, and then I'm going to turn to Andrew to open us up back into the Tree of Life. And it's one of those perfect days in our quite imperfect world where the snow is kind of perfectly like landing on the ground, and it's kind of a bright, sunny day. And, you know, there's about 2,000 people who live in this town, right? Not a big culinary menu, right, if you're interested in that. But it's just, you know, one of those days in which nature herself, right, kind of covered in white, you know, sings of possibility, and aesthetics are kind of filled with goodness. So,
yeah, I know those Vermont days.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, I know, totally. So it's great to be with everyone. Andrew, it's good to see you, brother.
Great to see you. Yeah.
Tree of Life.
Tree of Life. Yeah. So we've covered the top three, the supernal triad. So I mean, I'm getting my sources from odd places, but this is what I've heard it being called, and it's the Keter, Bina, and Hakama, right, the top of the tree. I was thinking maybe this time you could help us with the sort of general architecture of the whole thing, because from what I understand, there's the top three, top three stories, you've called them. And then there's the bottom 7 stories, which are mapped onto the 7 days of Genesis in some traditions. And,
right.
And so the top 3 are supposed to be beyond manifestation, and these 3 are supposed to be, we're moving into manifestation or something like that.
So maybe, I mean, here's the question, brother. So we're in our third conversation, and if we could maybe, again, as we always do, perhaps Lirazi, just or Krista, that just so people can see the Tree of Life. So if someone's joining us for the first time, you know, they don't have to have the entire background. So if we could maybe have in the chat box, just if anyone wants to take a look at it, take a look at the Tree of Life. So that's one, just so we have that in the context. Okay. So thank you, Zohar. Okay. So that's great. So that's one. 2 is, I mean, here's my thought, right? What we could do is, because, you know, I'm looking for it here. Let me just go in the chat box. Here we go. Okay. Right. Great. Okay. So what we could do is maybe Andrew, to fulfill your desire, and you know that, you know, my basic goal in our conversations is to fulfill your desire. So there's some place where that's the major intention, right? So that is our intention here. So to fulfill your desire, perhaps what we could do is then to merge a little bit of my thought with it, is maybe we could go in order, and we'll go to the next illumination. But in the next illumination, we'll use that occasion, the next illumination, which is a perfect place to expand into the larger tree, because from the next illumination, which is Chesed,
yeah,
overflowing love, right, we actually get a sense of the tree, right? That's going to give us a sense of what's happening. So the next dyad is very, very important, and that's a good place from which to both look at that dyad and then also kind of look at the tree. But let's begin with, if it's okay. So, Andrew, you threw out this notion of the supernal triad, which is used in kind of both in actually Hebrew interior sciences and in Christian Kabbalah. You know, that term, you know, the top 3, the Shiva Elionot, right, the highest. And let's perhaps go back to an image that we met in the beginning of our conversations, where we established that the Sephirot, which mean both sapphire, sapphire, and they also mean illumination, the illumination of the sapphire stone, right? Sapphire, light, right, is an expression of light. And it's also Sipur, which is story that you just alluded to. So there are these 10 points of light, but those points of light are stories. Now, this is a very, very big idea, meaning a story is not a human creation. It's one of the things I've been kind of screaming from the rooftops in the last, decade is something like, the ontology of there's stories all the way up and all the way down, that these 10 stories are the 10 primary plotline stories of reality. Right? So we've talked about 3 of them, which you called, the top 3, the higher manifestation, which, as you alluded to, are generally said to be beyond this world.
Yeah.
And then the bottom 7 that we're about to engage in the tree of life, right, engage this world, right? Those are the ones that are actually the stories that are more accessible, more recognizable, the plot lines, the sipurim. So that is both accurate and inaccurate in a very, very beautiful way. And so I want to go back there for a second. It's a beautiful way to start. So if you remember, we adduced a text in Luria, right? And this text in Luria is also cited by this beautiful man, Nachman of Breslov, right?
Rabbi Nachman, yeah.
Right, Rabbi Nachman. So Rabbi Nachman, right, has this very complex teaching, which people are like, no one ever gets to it because it's kind of at a particular place in the book, which is kind of towards the end that you don't get to. And a dear friend of mine, right, who we study together once a week, and he's probably like kind of the leading public Kabbalah scholar, in North America, who shall remain nameless. And so I studied with him this text, and I tried to share with him what this text was saying. And this text is talking about, I'll just give you one line from it, right? It's talking about that word that we invoked, which is this word ayeh, right? Ayeh, A-Y-E-H in English. And Zohar, who just put the Tree of Life in the chat box, Zohar, about 4 or 5 years ago, you and I spent an entire Holy of Holies studying this text of Nachman, right, where he basically says that there's one moment in the world, right, when you actually transcend, right, you end the trance of the 7 lower stories, which we're going to begin talking about, which are beautiful and sacred and wildly important and stunning, but you step beyond the 7 lower Sephirot, the 7 lower illuminations, the 7 lower points, the 7 lower Sephirot in the Tree of Life, and you actually become one with the upper 3. You actually embody the upper 3. And when does that happen? When you actually see suffering, and you scream out, "Ayeh, where is God?" So in a world, my brother, of CNN, right? In a world where only God saw 50 years ago the amount of suffering that's available to every human being in the world today, right? In actual visual images. And we don't notice that is a radical change of what it means to be a human being that goes completely unnoticed. In other words, right, we've completely changed the experience of a human being, where a human being today who tracks CNN and social media, right? I mean, I get on the thread of my phone. I have an Arab thread and an Israeli thread. Both of them give me, from Gaza, live feeds of battles. Literally, from the head cams of both sides, right, on my phone. That's insane, right? I mean, in other words, right, you literally see boys going, right, you see, I mean, it's right, and you see images, of unbearable suffering on CNN. So we're in this place where there's this new human vision, which is unbearable suffering. So that can either cause 2 things. It either causes us to turn away, right? I mean, the basic movement, let's say, of, this gentleman who wrote a book with our friend Mr. Chopra, and Mr. Chopra, Deepak, sent me the book after a conversation we had. He did it with a professor, Leonard Mlodinow, who's a professor at Caltech, and it's called The War of Worldviews. Right, so on page 63, there's the only important page there, right? I mean, it's a lovely book, but the one important page where Mlodinow says, listen, right, my mother was in Auschwitz, that he describes a horrific Auschwitz scene, And he says, I want nothing to do, right, with this claim of, absolute spirit in the world. And all the rest of the book is basically from that premise. So he sees evil and he turns away. But there's another response. That's of course Ivan and Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Right, in his conversation with Alyosha, right?
Yeah.
Right? And it runs through as, Elena, we've talked about it, runs as a theme, like major existential themes do, through the beauty of Russian literature. So there's another response. And the other response is you see evil and it rips your heart apart, and you know that it's a violation of something essential, and you know that it shouldn't be there, and you realize, oh my God, I live in an intimate universe. Right? Because evil is a failure of intimacy. And then, says Luria, then you become Keter Chochmah and Binah. At that moment, when you scream in protest and you say, Aye, Aleph, Keter, Yud, the second letter, Chochmah, Hey, the third letter, Binah, right? When I see evil and I scream and my heart's broken at the world, my heart's utterly devastated and broken, in that moment of utter brokenness, Nachman writes, Ein shalem milev shavur, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. At that moment, I'm completely whole. At that moment, I'm utterly merged with the top three Sephirot. But I become the divine story. I become God.
Mm-hmm.
So that, it's shocking. It's unbearably beautiful. It's unbearably paradoxical, and it's true. So there are these moments in life where everything falls aside, right? And we scream, oh God, right? And those are these moments of ultimate explosion. And that ultimate explosion is not only an orgiastic ecstasy, right? It's in the ecstasy of protest. When I demand justice and I'm horrified by that which my gaze is forced to bear, and in the scream of protest, I become one with the upper three Sephirot and the tree of life. So in that sense, you begin to see how the easy distinctions don't quite work. In other words, the supernal triad actually enters into the very center of modern life. You can't approach CNN, right, which is this new moment in humanity that literally never existed before. And we forget that. It never existed before, right? I mean, last sentence, right? I mean, when the Allied forces bombed Germany, right, at the end of World War II, we didn't see pictures of the bombings, right? In other words, you didn't see basically children being taken out of the rubble, right? So you could kind of put it in a corner of your head, right? And even you could say, this is what we need to do in order to defeat Nazism, and onward, Christian soldiers, as it were, right? It's a different reality, and it creates a complexity and a pain, right, that rips us apart, and that should rip us apart. But in that ripping apart, we become God. Shah. Okay.
Yeah. So, what I was thinking about when you were talking is a few things. I was thinking about when I first saw the videos coming out of, on Twitter or something, and I just saw them and I started sobbing, and then I felt a sense of intense despair. And then something shifted a little bit, and I was able to, function again. It's almost like that, right? So what you're saying, I can see that it could happen on a very big level, a big epic level, as you're describing, but also happen, like it on a very small sort of like day-to-day level, like almost like we go through this, in our daily life a lot. That's one thought. And the second thought I had was like, we're doing a course on Gurdjieff, who I'm very fond of, and he was always talking about the terror of the situation and how important it is to move into the terror of the situation, to make this quantum leap, which he called an octave in music. So it's an octave is a sort of quantum leap from where you are to some other place, and that really reminds me of what you're talking about here, and in different language and different terms.
Yeah, amen. Right. It's to face into the terror of the situation and into the intense beauty of the situation.
Yeah.
right? And we'll have to have at a different time. We'll do a dialogue on Gurdjieff, where there's a lot to say about that. I had a very deep Gurdjieff phase and left it for a bunch of reasons, but that's a different conversation. We have many waiting. We stay in the tree of life. But it is worth saying, though, that I have to face into the terror of the situation, that, as you say, Andrew, brother, it's intimately personal, has to become, it's part of the fabric of the personal. And I also have to face into the intense beauty, right, of the situation, right? Mm-hmm. And what it's why we begin the Dharma of CosmoErotic Humanism. We were talking about it a little while ago with, we live in a world of outrageous pain, sentence 1. Sentence 2, we live in a world of outrageous beauty. And you can't have one without the other. The terror and the beauty are complete interpenetrated, and it can't be an idea. And, one of the problems with ideas is, there's one person who I love dearly, who whenever I share a Dharma with, the person knows, I know that, right? And then we're not, we gotta be a baby. We gotta like open up and just hear it afresh, see the beauty afresh, right? And see the terror afresh, right? But we can't do it all the time. So I just want to just offer with permission, brother, a practice, a first principle. And Nachman calls it, Litzte'er b'tzara shechina, right? To participate in the pain of the Shekhinah of goddess, of the Shekhinah of she, and exile, which is a practice that I do for 5 minutes a day. Right? Because I can't face into the terror in every moment, and I can't face into right, I'm overwhelmed, right? And so so there's a practice where for 5 minutes a day I stop, right? I bracket, and I allow myself first to face into the beauty, then to face into the terror, and then go back to the beauty. So the terror is held between these two beauties, right? And I actually but it's actually, the whole practice is 5-6 minutes a day, and then I go back to my life. Because that allows me, and it's a very, very powerful practice, because mental institutions are filled with our most sane people, right? Who couldn't actually justify turning away, right? Yep. And so we have to be able to face in and not turn away, and yet maintain our capacity to be God's verbs, to be verbs of Eros. And so that practice for me, right, since I'm, 17, 18, has been kind of core to practice, right? To every day face into Litzter, to participate in both the pain and the beauty of the Shekhinah, 5 minutes a day full on, and then to step back and then to engage.
The exile of the Shekhinah, you said.
The exile, the right to participate with the pain of the Shekhinah and exile, right? Which is first to look into the terror, to look into the pain, because the Shekhinah is not just the infinity of power, she's the infinity of pain, right? In other words, we think of the Shekhinah as the infinity of power, but the Shekhinah is the infinity of feeling, the infinity of pain. So imagine my broken heart, and then exponentialize into infinity, Gödel's theorem, this increasing infinity, right, of pain, right? So if divinity is infinite, right, it's not just infinite power, it's infinite pain. And so am I willing to risk my very being to, for a moment, cry with she, right? And at the same time, the ecstasy of she is infinite. Again, she's not just infinity of power or infinity of pain, she's infinity of joy. She's infinity of ecstasy. So am I willing, right, to bracket my pleasure ceiling, right, and to actually step to the other side and participate with her in the unimaginably infinite laughter of Cosmos, Yoshev B'Shamayim Yitzchak. She sits in the heavens, but Yitzchak, and she laughs. So that practice, right, is what makes us homo amor. It's how we become the new human, the new humanity. So this is
that's how we do it. That's we do it. That's really beautiful. That's incredible. Yeah, and it also helps me a lot bring these things in, down from abstraction. Like right. in the iconography, you always see the goddess, and she has a butcher knife in one hand, and she has a bowl of nectar in the other. So that's what you're talking about. But, I often think of that an abstraction, but it's not abstract. You know?
Right. No, you have to make right. In other words, one of the things I sat with my dear friend Sally Kempton. She was writing a book back in the day, a few years back, called Awakening Shakti, and I was we were in wherever that is, Pacific Grove, wherever we were, not Pacific Grove, in Carmel Valley. And it was a several month period where I was there. And so we each had our own wing of the house. And she was writing Awakening Shakti, and we would look at the images of she, right, and the images in the Hebrew lineage, and okay, now what does that mean? Right, let's translate that, right? But not, again, this is the key. This is so beautiful and it's so deep. So it's not that we're gonna make it accessible. That's not what it means. It means in all hermeneutics of interior sciences, there's what they call a fourfold path. And there's about 10 of it. But in the fourfold path, you have pshat, the simplest interpretation. Then you have remez, the illusion, right? What's the archetypal illusion, right? There's drash. There's a kind of deeper, allegoric, mystical meaning. And then there's sod, which is the deepest mystery. Sod is the secret, the deepest secret. So Keter, the highest in the tree of life, right, is sod, the deepest secret. Shekhinah, or Malchut, right, the first, right, the lowest, if you will, right, the lowest in the tree of life is Pshat, simple. But Keter and Malchut are one.
Are one, yeah, right. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that at one point, the oneness of the two. Because when at the beginning I said higher and lower, and whenever I say that, I think it's, as you say, it's right and it's wrong, because it's not higher and lower because they're non-dual. I hate, sorry to use that word, but they're not two.
They're not two. They're not two. They're dimensions of reality. And so what that means is, in terms of our conversation, it's that unless you can access it in its most elemental, simple way, you actually don't understand it. In other words, that's the way the interior scientists, the way, there's a term that I coined about, 15, 20 years ago, I call an erotic mystic, right? So we're a band of outrageous lovers of erotic mystics. The way the erotic mystic, or the way the realizer, right, is able to express iconography is actually because they have a deep interior experience, right? And people forget that. So people go to the iconography or to the book or to the theosophy, when actually the theosophy is a merger of the study of a lineage with one's own deepest inner realizations. So it all has to live in me, and it has to live in me in this very, very clear way. I mean, I don't want to go down this road. Just one more sentence. For the last 3 nights, right? I mean, I've been in this very, very intense place of kind of, I don't know what to call it, but kind of like an awake mystical dreaming. And in each dream, I'm hearing her say, clarify your emotion precisely. Right? Not your action. We think it's about action, but just to clarify the way you feel. We think that feeling is what happens to us. We have the capacity to be masters of feeling, because my feeling is not this local psychological structure in me. My feeling is the field of feeling, the field of Eros. So the entire tree of life is the field of reality. All of the feelings live in the field. And so it's not my psychological separate self idiosyncratic structure. It's the unique, irreducible expression, right, of a larger feeling in the field, which has its own quality that's now uniquely awake in me. So I can actually access the original source of that feeling in the field, let it infuse. This is a very direct practice. And let's say I'm feeling anger. Let's start with anger. Right? So I access anger not in my personal story. I drop the story. Step one is I drop the story. I let the story go. Then I go back to the field of she. I access the quality of anger in the field, which is a pure quality. Mm-hmm. Then I bring that pure quality back into my body. I let that pure quality fill me up. And then I see, how does that apply or not apply, right, to my separate self situation? And the same thing's true with joy. And the same thing's true with ecstasy. The same thing's true with brokenness. Meaning I've got to access that feeling in the field. It's not my feeling. I've got to access it. So any deep iconography lives, right, is an expression of an elemental, simple pshat, right? Level one, right? A simple, second simplicity, profound feeling that lives in me that I then needed to give words to. So I gave it words in a theosophical structure. I gave it words in iconography, right? But actually that feeling, let's say, of the goddess, right, who's coming, with the butcher knife and with the nourishment, right? That experience quite literally lives in me. Yeah. Right? I feel life radically threatening me. Right? At my very core, I'm threatened. And at my very core, I'm nourished. Right? And you can't have a conversation about anything without having, right, a field. I mean, last example, and we'll step into our conversation today. I mean, I couldn't sleep last night. Right? I had KK and I had an agreement we were going to meet and watch a movie. So KK picked the movie. It was Maestro. KK, if you're listening, I don't know if you're listening, honey, she fell asleep about 9 minutes into the movie. Right? If I was, I know. That's what KK does. She picks a movie and then she falls asleep 9 minutes later. I'm stuck with the movie, right? Which is kind of a separate problem. We're not going to go down that road right now, right? But in any case, so Maestro is about Leonard Bernstein. So afterwards, I'm like completely awake and can't sleep, and like all sorts of images are kind of moving through me. So I, flip on something that someone had mentioned to me, and it's this discussion. I looked a bunch of things up about the issue of kind of consent and sexuality. It was a intellectual debate between a couple of academics on consent, and I'm working on the phenomenology of Eros, so I listened to it. And I just realized, and one of the lines in it was, citing a particular scholar, is that consent is what transforms ostensible rape into lovemaking. Right? No, what a horrible sentence. Right? Just to say. Right? In other words, you can't talk about consent without realizing there's a field of desire. It's not some weird thing moving through. There's a field of desire in which you participate, which you both participate. You can't even have a conversation around sexuality if you understand sexuality to be this unique, strange thing that lives in you, that it's in violation of the nature of reality, where the default position is it would be rape, and consent transforms it into lovemaking. What a horror, right? Yeah. There's a field of desire in which I participate, and actually the two Sephirot we're about to come to is about the field of desire and the two dimensions of desire, which are boundary and breaking boundary. Right? But those are two qualities of the field. And so without that, you can't even have a conversation. So here we go. Okay. We're up for these two qualities.
Wonderful. And just, again, I'm so excited about what you're talking about because it's so close to my own tradition. We talk about rasas, and rasas are fields of pure feeling, and they have different textures and tones, and like music, and some of them are fierce and wrathful and destructive like Gevurah, and some of them are beautiful and sweet like Chesed, right?
Well, for yes, except for the last sentence, which is we got to decide whether Gevurah is wrathful and Chesed sweet. So that's
okay. Yeah, I knew that you'd have to correct me there.
No correction. I'm saying that was but yes, there in the sense that there are these. It's so helpful to know that I'm not crazy, right? That my craziness is sane. I mean. Right. Meaning that when this brokenness overwhelms me, it's the brokenness, right, of goddess and morning, right? When ecstasy overwhelms me, right, it's a field, right? And in other words, my entire interior is the tree of life, which is the field of reality as it lives in me uniquely. And then my life is so much larger and so much more beautiful. And then I can begin to mythologize and not pathologize. Right. And what we basically do is we not only do we pathologize, if we just pathologize, it would be okay. Then we go to medicalize, right? And what we basically do is we don't have a way, right, of actually engaging the fullness of the human being So we create this model of a human being who's supposed to be functional in a particular socioeconomic structure and productive in a very particular way and if a person's not that way, they're pathological.
Yeah. And if we didn't have these communities, we'd all be in one of those places probably, right?
Right. And it's, we basically medicalize, right? People who refuse, right, to actually bow to the imposed structure of an insane society. Right, but actually, those people are often the prophets of sanity, right? And so we have to actually begin to kind of evolve the source code and reweave the field and realize that we live in this, right? What the Tree of Life says is that we live in a participatory universe, and a map of the universe in which we participate is the Tree of Life. It's not the only map, but it's a primary. It's the Solomonic map. It's the map of the lineage of Solomon, which informed the Renaissance, right? Now, you can't, for example, you can think about Gurdjieff without going through the Renaissance. Gurdjieff is integrating from different post-Renaissance schools right into his particular integration of it, right? Okay. So Tree of Life, my friend, Tree of Life.
Yeah.
Tree of Life.
So Hesed is the first day of creation, on one level, it's light, I guess. But it's also kindness and compassion and
so let's start.
That's a bunch of things, right? Also, I've reading Deanne Fortune's book. She talks about how it's like wu wei wu is the doing of not doing, the opening, and then whereas or maybe I'm getting mixed up. Whereas Gevurah is sort of the active force. Anyway, these are just a bunch of ideas and things that I've read about them. So let's hear your.
Let's get started. That's a great start. So let's go. If it's okay, brother, we'll go slow, so we can go fast, right? Derech aruka shiktsara. We'll take the longer way, which is the shorter way. So let's just start with the word chesed. So it would be, if we're writing in the chat box, it would be CHESED, chesed, just so people kind of get the word chesed, CHESED, chesed. And chesed means, right, it's a very, very interesting word, right? So let's go the long way. So you've heard of Hasidism.
Mm-hmm.
So Hasidism is chesed.
Ah.
Right? A chesed is a chesed person. But what a chesed person means is the law is not enough for me.
Ah, wow.
I want more.
Oh.
I want more. So we generally think that chesed is breaking the boundary of the law by going against the law, right? By going antinomian. We think, right? I break a boundary, I'm antinomian, I'm against nomos. But actually, I can be transnomian. And
the letter of the law is not enough, right?
That's right. The law is not enough. It's not enough for me to live with you, divine, in a kind of classical marriage where people can barely communicate and we're not sure how we got here and we don't feel the same way and we've lost the thread, right, of Eros and we don't even know how to have a conversation. We call it a marriage. And I don't want that. I want to be a chassid, right? Yeah. I want to be radically merged. I want to be filled with passion. I want to be able to bracket my ego, give up our history, and begin anew with you, God, every single day. That's the Hasidic revolution. So the Hasidic revolution is law is not enough. Right? It's very beautiful, right? It's generally painted in kind of a lot of the Western literature as this kind of revolution against the law. Well, it was a revolution against the law, but what it said is law is not enough. It's not passionate enough. It's not beautiful enough. So chesed is always to break the boundary of classical limitation, whatever classical limitation is. Now, that means that it's going to have both a shadow and a light quality. But chesed is the experience of desire. That's what chesed is, the experience of desire, which moves to break classical boundaries. So it could be a desire for more God. So I break the boundary of the classical homo religiosus in Hebrew wisdom who keeps just the law, and I say the law is not enough, right? I want to dance. So you always see pictures of, right, Hasidim, and I come from a Hasidic tradition, right? In other words, from a Hasidic lineage. So you dance. You dance in ecstasy, but there's no law to dance, right? But the law is not enough, right? So we dance in ecstasy, right? So, or I say, I don't just want to love, I want outrageous love. So outrageous love means I want love that participates in the quality of chesed that breaks all boundaries, right? So boundary breaking eros, right? Both in its sacred form, meaning, so for example, a person might say, I'm going to fast for 7 days because of chesed. because I want to become closer to the divine. Right? So, right, and we always think, right, it must be some rave where you're having sex with 72 versions and an Islamic version of a particular kind of fundamentalism on particularly good kinds of, MDMA, and that's chesed. Well, not exactly. Chesed, right? That's a version, but chesed means I'm breaking the boundary of limitation in order to be in my utter fullness. Now, it can have shadow. So, for example, incest in biblical texts, in the book of Leviticus, is called chesed. Right? Chesed, incest. Right? Why?
This goes back to our conversation on Shabtai Tzvi a little bit, perhaps.
This goes back to our conversation on Shabtai Tzvi. Exactly right. So in other words, meaning I'm loving so much, and my love is love desire, and then I break the boundary, right? And that's a shadow, right? And obviously incest is a shadow breaking of the boundary, right? As has been, articulated psychologically very powerfully, right? By, all cultures appropriately and correctly so, right? And so we say, no, you can't break that boundary, right? So that's an anti-chesed position correctly. So chesed is a neutral term which describes boundary breaking. So this is one of the stories of God. You begin to see how beautiful it gets. So we say there's 10 divine stories. So one of the stories of reality is boundary breaking.
Okay. So that would mean, sorry to interrupt, that would mean that Gevurah is boundary making, would it? I mean, I don't want to get ahead of us too much, but that's the obvious conclusion, right?
That is, so we have a dyad now. Yeah. That's starting to get interesting. So we have a dyad in the tree of life. We have a dyad in the tree of life, and the dyad is chesed, boundary breaking, right? Gevurah. Now let's just go careful for a second. So the word Gevurah, let's go literal for a second. So Gevurah, let's just first say the word Gevurah. Thank you, sir. Whoever just put that up. Who is that? Lane, I owe you an email. Thank you. Okay. Lane, thank you for putting that up. Okay, brother. Right. So Lane, right. So Gevurah, Gevurah. Gevurah is Gibor, is hero. Right? And the hero, and let's stay close. The hero is one. So, and this is what's called a contronym in English. A contronym means you have a word and its opposite. So the word gever, masculine, gever is masculine. Gibor is hero. Okay? So what it means is gever is that which overwhelms. Right? So the overwhelmed feeling that can live in a man or a woman. So it's not man or woman. And so the overwhelmed feeling is the feeling, I would say, the feeling, let's say in sexuality, of the emergence of aroused desire that feels like it's going to overcome me. Right? So there's that feeling. So that's chesed. Then the capacity to direct it, to create a boundary, to choose how to apply it, right? To actually engage it and to reshape it is Gevurah.
Yeah, Dion calls it the Dragon Slayer. Does that work for you?
It's not,
at least the knight. The knight is somebody who disciplines his. That's right. His energy.
The knight. Lancelot has good and bad days in his Guinevere, kind of attraction. But there's that, right? But yes, there's this notion of Gibor, but the Gibor is not a dragon slayer. See, that's the thing. The dragon slayer, that's why, is already deep influence of Western culture and body-mind splits. I'd rather say the dragon befriender. I want to make friends with the dragon.
The dragon seducer, maybe.
The dragon seducer. I want to engage the dragon. I want to transmute that energy because and this is where often I think that the fortune school, if you will, right, gets very, very subtly influenced by Western principles and is unaware of the influence. Right, because the dragon, there's something in Kabbalah, in the Zohar, in Volume 3, which is called the left-handed emanation, which is called the way of the dragon.
Yeah. Well, is it sometimes associated with like the left-hand paths or the left hand of God?
It is not unrelated, brother, to the left-hand paths. And so the way of the dragon is more like the way where I ride the dragon, right? I want to ride the dragon. I want to actually have a relationship to the dragon. And that's why, the riding of the dragon is not the dragon slayer, St. George. We slay the dragon. It's more like I befriend the dragon. I make friends, right, with the shadow. So we'll come back to that. But befriending the shadow, engaging the shadow, Lirazi, that would be, right, our unique self shadow, right? That whole 100 pages is about that particular approach. So let's talk about boundary breaking, and let's talk about, right, the capacity to create a boundary which then becomes fruitful, which is generative. So, for example, let's say you and I have a conversation right now. Here's the perfect example. So just by us limiting the conversation to the two of us in this moment, even though lots of people have lots of important things to say, we're surrounded by people who are wise and deep and wonderful. Nonetheless, by limiting the conversation to us, we create a space. That's a limitation. Mm-hmm. There's a diet, right? Now, if we'd have lots of people talking, it'd be great, but we wouldn't have the space. That's a boundary. Mm-hmm. That's right there. That is Gevurah.
That's right? Got it. Boundary.
Marriage is Gevurah. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. It's in some sense, it's just the two of us. Right? So, okay, bad rendition of the song, got it. Okay, but you get the idea, right? If it's just the two of us, right? So then it creates by making it just us, and creating a boundary around us, right? It allows something to be generated that couldn't be generated without the boundary, right? That's a very, very powerful idea. And it could be what we could do now, if you're up for it, love, is we could kind of just try and go deep into this. In other words, what is chesed? What is the quality of boundary breaking? What's chesed? And what's gevurah, right? What is the quality of boundary creating? Both of which are not sweet or angry, right? In other words, both of us are both sweet and angry.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got that. Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was thinking of a parent and a child as you were talking. Like, my child has this incredible expressiveness, and then I have to sort of contain that to give him a place where... It's not that I'm necessarily being fierce with him. I'm just creating a boundary. In fact, if I am fierce with him, maybe that would destroy the dance between the boundary and the non-boundary.
And maybe I need to be both tender and fierce, right? Yeah. And maybe fierce is not mean. Maybe there's a quality of fierceness which is not mean, but it's like draw, right? I notice, as Zion was supposed to spend the weekend with me, but the snowstorm kind of subvented it. But in other words, when I see Zion, the first thing he wants to do is he wants to wrestle, right? In other words, he wants to engage. He wants to kind of like, rah, so we have a kind of, and he's now 13, but we've been doing some version of the monster mash when we meet for, 7-8 years, because there's a fierceness to the meeting that actually has sacred energy. So Gevurah, a fierceness to it, right?
Yep.
It has a sharpness to it. It has a boundary to it. It has right? And it has this quality that plays with boundary breaking. And so maybe what we can do is, here's a way to play it. So this is a good place to engage the principle of the sexual models, the erotic, right? Which is a core principle in CosmoErotic Humanism. And it's based on a verse in the book of Job, which is core to the lineage of Solomon. And the verse is, we've talked about it before, brother, mi psari echazeh Eloah, right? Through my body, I vision God. And so my body is the polymorphously perverse, right? That the body of desire, which participates in the field of desire. And that models Eros, which is the larger field of ethos, of Eros, of creativity, of nobility, right? Of all of that. So if we think about it for a second, there's a very, very beautiful text, which is the very last text in the Talmud. It appears in two places. And, roughly, and those of us who have studied, over the last, 15 years, we have a sense of this text. But basically, the short version of the story is you have this man who comes home, I'm paraphrasing it, from the Aramaic. He comes home early from a business trip, right? He kind of rushes in, honey, I'm home. He hears kind of some rustling upstairs, and he's very excited to go see his wife. And he rushes up, right, to the bedroom, and there is his wife, unclothed on the bed. He's a little surprised, but, kind of delighted. And, there are these cookies, right, that are on the side, and he's about to go eat the cookies, right? And, he has a particular allergy of some kind, whatever it is. and then this voice comes out from the closet tumbling out, and it's the milkman who says, "Don't eat the cookies." Right? That's the case in the Talmud, which, give or take, right? And so the Talmud has this debate, this legal debate: is the milkman considered legally an adulterer or not? So, right, the general opinion is, well, of course, right? And as he got home early, the milkman's there, right? I mean, right? In other words, clearly, right? And so people are confused. So if he's an adulterer, he would want the wife, says the second opinion. So if he knew that the guy had an allergy and he stopped him from eating the cookies, which would have killed him, he's probably not an adulterer, because if he was an adulterer, clearly he wants the wife sexually. If the husband would have eaten the cookies and died, he would have gotten the wife sexually. So clearly he's not an adulterer. That's the second opinion. To which the first opinion replies and says, no, he only wants her if she's married. Right?
Okay.
In other words, he does want her, but only if she's married. Right?
Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen to his field of desire is she becomes available. Right?
Right.
So,
yeah, what is most taboo is often the most, thing that draws us.
The Talmud then cites this opinion, right? Said Rabbi Isaac, right? Mayim gnuvim yumtaku v'lechem strei min am. Stolen waters are sweet, right? From Solomon.
Right.
And then he says, and from the day that the temple was destroyed, the passion of Eros was taken from the righteous and given to the violators, right? Meaning that not the temple historically, but in temple consciousness, you have full desire for the person who's available to you.
Yeah.
Right? But when the temple falls, meaning when you lose access to temple consciousness, then you only have desire when you're breaking a certain kind of boundary.
Yeah, you're in the mimetic rivalry mode, like that Gerard talks about, right?
You're in some sort of...
There's always a third element. There's always a shadow to your desire.
It's only when it's illicit, right, when you're breaking a boundary, right, that actually you have desire. But now let's stay close, because this is where. So the Talmud seems to be saying, right, that actually desire that's associated with boundary breaking, right, is an expression of, right, the fall of temple consciousness. That's not exactly right, right? In other words, and there's actually an entire school of thought, right? So, for example, my friend Esther, we had a bunch of conversations about this, Esther Perel. So Esther talks about, Eros being only transgressive, right? Eros is transgressive. It has to be boundary breaking or there's no erotic charge. But that's actually not true. That's not what the lineage is saying. What the lineage is saying is you have to be able to cultivate discernment around your boundary breaking, right? Meaning what happens is if you're not boundary breaking for real in your life, if you're not boundary breaking, right, as, experiencing yourself in every second, I am the bride of Shekhinah, and I'm the bride of reality. I am Princess Bride, right? I am the goddess herself. I am God himself, right? And I am breaking boundaries to new levels of loving, to new levels of Eros, to new levels, new capacities of desire. I'm ripping my heart open again and again, right? And as I'm loving anew like I've never done before. If I do that, so I've got to be constantly boundary breaking. So if I'm constantly boundary breaking for real, then I don't need to boundary break artificial boundaries.
And also, if you're boundary breaking effectively, you have a boundary around you that allows you to do that. I'm thinking, for example, of my marriage. I'm the boundary breaker, in our marriage, and my wife is always like, watch out, be careful, you're going too far, or something like that, right? And then so that this allows me not to end up in the loony bin,
Right. So you need someone to hold you as you boundary break.
Yeah.
Right, who's right, for sure. Yeah. First off, yes, and actually, yes. Let's just leave it at yes. And let's make this distinction, right? Which is, I need to incarnate the quality of divinity, which is erotic boundary breaking. And even in my sexuality, I should be boundary breaking, but not an artificial boundary, right? Like, right. In other words, I'm only attracted because she's married, or I'm only attracted because he's married. That's an artificial boundary. But even in my sexuality, I need to be boundary breaking. If I'm not boundary breaking my sexuality, right, then basically you lose the thread of Eros, right? Because you've seen that body before. It's not arousing. So you have to be boundary breaking within your sexuality. And boundary breaking is what we do is we don't break boundaries. So we find a new toy. A new toy doesn't do it. Or we add a person, or we try a new position. That's not boundary breaking. That's just new mechanics. Yeah. Right? Boundary breaking means there's a level of vulnerability. There's a level of self-revelation.
Deeper intimacy.
There's a part of me I'm willing to let show up that's never showed up before, right? Mm-hmm. So we can make love over 20 years, and it's never the same. Because we always walk in, right, like a virgin, right, for the very first time, in which we actually rip open a new part of my heart. A new part of me shows up. And when that new part of me shows up, then there's a new quality of arousal, and there's a new fuck, and there's a new Eros, and as you say, brother, there's a new intimacy. So I have to be boundary breaking in my sexuality. I've got to be boundary breaking in my creativity. I've got to be boundary breaking in my love. I can't love you like I loved you. Right? If I love you like I loved you yesterday, right, then love wilts and dies. So the quality of Chesed is, on the one hand, right, I've got to completely break the boundary of the way I sex and the way I create and the way I love, but not the artificial boundary. Mm-hmm. The artificial boundary means I've exiled boundary breaking into its artificial form of stolen waters or sweet. And therefore I need to be that. And that's where you get kind of inappropriate promiscuity, because I'm just boundary breaking because I need a new pair of breasts or a new body, right? Or a new something, right? In order to be aroused. No. What I want to do is I want to actually not see a new body. I want to see the same body with new eyes. Mm-hmm. Right? In other words, and then at the same time, I need Gevurah, I need boundary, and boundary means that the currency of Eros that's moving through me doesn't unmoor me, right? It actually grounds me, right? My commitments become deeper. Right, my precision becomes deeper. Right, I'm both surrendered, overtaken, and yet more myself than I ever was.
And that's related to what you were talking about the last time about ethics, I think, right?
Yes.
The Eros being, deepening your ethical commitment.
Yes, and
rather than the other way around, rather than it being, a pursuit of stolen sweetness.
Right.
Stolen waters.
No, exactly, love. Right. In other words, I'm trying to find the right words with you. Right. And I'm so overtaken. I'm so surrendered. I've broken all inappropriate boundaries. Right. So I'm in my radical freedom, which grounds me in the right identity, in my selfness, in my right boundary more than anything else in the world will. And it's externally imposed boundary, which cuts off my Eros. It's the natural, irreducibly unique expression of my Eros. And the ultimate Gevurah, the ultimate heroism, is the unique self-hero. And I know we're going to start, God willing, when is it, in September, with you and me and Lirazi and David, we're going to start, doing every other month this unique self kind of dive into this new form of enlightenment, this CosmoErotic Humanism, unique self. But what unique self is the ultimate boundary. Right? In other words, there's a boundary called Andrew Sweeneyness, right? And it's a boundary which both needs to be protected, right? I can't violate that boundary, right? But it's a unique boundary. No matter what Marc Gafni can do, no matter what I do, I can never express the beauty and the depth and the wonder that will emerge from the unique configuration. A configuration is a boundary of Andrew Sweeneyness. Right? And so unique self is actually the precise dance or dialectical tension, right, or coincidentia oppositorium, right, between Chesed, boundary breaking. So I break all the boundaries of superficiality, all the boundaries of artificiality, right, until I'm so clarified that I'm in the perfect boundary configuration of Andrew Sweeneyness, right? Oh my God, that's how more and more.
It's interesting. You've kind of reversed my notion a little bit of these two two things, because I kind of thought of Gevurah as being cutting things, like, breaking apart things that need to be broken apart. Whereas Hesed, it is in a way, but Hesed is in a way it's the breaking of boundaries. So Hesed is this, whereas Gevurah is placing a limitation, boundary, not a limitation, but I'm getting all the words wrong here, but
no.
But this seems like it'd be a bit of a reversal of how I saw the two in the beginning.
Let's stay with your original vision. Let's synergize them, because I think that they deserve that, right? Because I think it's accurate. Gevurah is a cutting away, right? But Gevurah limits all that is artificial, right? Gevurah means, right, that I discern between pseudo-eros and eros.
Mm-hmm.
So Gevurah is the heroism, right, that understands that the opposite of the holy is the superficial.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Right? That's Gevurah, right? I mean, in some sense, if you would, here, let's give an example of it. Here. This is a book called The Shallows. It was written in 2010, right? Zach and I are finishing this book on kind of value and techno-feudalism. So this is written by Nicholas Carr. It was kind of the first book in this genre, and he appropriately called it The Shallows. And shallow means superficial, and it's a description of the contemporary internet. And the contemporary internet is precisely a collapse of Gevurah, right? In other words, what is it? In other words,
boundaries, yeah.
That's right. Now, the contemporary internet is the exteriorization of the postmodern mind. Now, the postmodern mind has no plot line. There's no story that's better than any other story. So basically, you jump any place, right? There's no storyline. There's no current of desire that has a plot line and a storyline. So you're just jumping around every place. There's no storyline. There's no boundary that locates you, right? And so that's shallowness. So he calls the internet the shallows, because you go to read something. So you read a line and you've got a hyperlink, right? Then you're off to the hyperlink. Then you're kind of back to the next hyperlink. And then you come back 45 minutes later and you've read one line, right? Because the internet's designed as in now my language, he doesn't talk about this, but he uses the word the shallows, but he intuits something, right? That actually, and that's what I'm calling the internet is this exteriorization. It's an exterior expression of the interior quality of the postmodern mind, which has no Gevurah. There's no discipline, right? I've got my phone. Look at my phone. I've got my phone here, right? So I've got my phone. So let's just go away here. Do not disturb. Go away. Why are you doing this to me now when I'm trying to open you? Hold on. Here we go. So let's take a look at this. This is great. So you look at my phone. Okay, this is my phone. So my phone is filled with all these icons, and each one is trying to grab my attention. Each one's shiny.
Yeah.
They're designed by Boggs's persuasive technology laboratory that Tristan's talked about, right? And each one's intended to take me out of kind of the currency of desire. Here, no boundary.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. Right? So Gevurah is this appropriate boundary.
Wonderful. Well, what I was thinking about, if you don't, I was just thinking about how the shallowness of the internet, and how that affects all of us, and how that affects me, could create a kind of dialectic where, we need Gevurah now. So in my case, I was writing a lot of essays, and I've gone back to writing poetry because I don't want to think, in this mechanical way, in this shallow mechanical way that's being thrust upon me on endless blogs on the internet. I want to go back into something more intimate and interesting and expressive, like poetry. So I think that there's an opportunity with the shallowness. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful, right? In other words, poetry is in some sense, right? And you could say it like this: language has different dimensions, but the shadow of language is Gevurah. Does that make sense, everybody? The shadow of language is Gevurah.
Or the depth.
Right? So language is this, you have this full range of expression, and then a word, right, is this narrowing of expression to a particular meaning, right? A language has a particular boundary, which is why, for example, Leonard Slater, sitting in Mill Valley, in 1995 or something like that, wrote a book called The Alphabet and the Goddess. right? And the goddess for him was Eros, right? And language, so language is Gevurah, is boundary, right? And poetry, right? And poetry is when I'm trying to break the boundary of words into the field of Eros itself.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's Chesed. So that's beautiful, right? Now, paradoxically, right? Poetry, Chesed, right, is an expression of silence. But it's actually an expression of a particular erotic union between language and silence. The erotic union between language and silence is poetry.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, right? It's like, right? And that's why, so I need, every relationship has to have boundary and boundary breaking. And I need to always be engaged in boundary, which means I'm in my story. I'm not an imposter. Does that make sense? Right? To be an imposter is to be not in Gevurah. Gevurah is about actually, it's not just limitation, it's authenticity, right? In other words, I can't be Lane Harrison. Can't do it. Not going to happen, right? There's an authenticity to Lane that if Andrew tries to imitate, he'll be an imitator. He'll be an imposter. So again, what we've done is we've literally transformed the way people understand Gevurah. Gevurah is understood very superficially as this kind of limitation, this kind of, no. Gevurah means it's configuration that is, right, Shaftiness, that is Simoniness, right, that is Dorotheaness, right? It's that, right? And then that's filled with Chesed, right, with this currency of radical Eros, right? That, yeah.
But also limiting yourself, because the internet provides you infinite information, and then you have to shut it down, and you have to go in. You have to limit yourself to one thing rather than doing 15 other things, or you just become manically attention deficit.
Well, so here's maybe the last thing. This is a very good place to. So. The entire tree of life are actually 10 expressions of the field of Eros. That's the nature of the tree of life. There's a field of Eros, and the tree of life is 10 expressions of the tree of Eros, or the field of Eros. And the field of Eros is the field of attention. He just introduced the word attention, which is a beautiful, beautiful word. And Carr's phrase in this forgotten book, right, is that the internet is the expression of scattered attention.
Yeah.
It's a good phrase, right? So I'm gonna cite Carr for it. So Eros is the placing of attention. But when I place attention, I have to do it like a virgin. Meaning I have to allow myself to be surprised. Right? And you know exactly what I mean, right? I allow myself to be surprised. So when I study the Dharma, which I've been formulating day and night for the last 15 years, right? I will always study it anew. Meaning it's why it's why I never have any time, because I never rely on yesterday, but I always do my best to kind of approach it with fresh eyes and empty myself out and place my attention anew for the very first time. But when I do that, then I'm in Eros and I'm in the field, right? And so Chesed is one way of placing attention, right? I break the boundary of yesterday and I place my attention anew, right? In a new way, right? That's one side of the placing of attention. Gevurah is, right? I place my attention, right? In other words, I don't keep shifting prisms. I'm looking through a very particular prism. So Da Vinci is always looking through Da Vinci's prism. And I've got to beware of not becoming an idolater. And an idolater means I'm serving not through my authenticity, but through the stranger in me. Remember George Steiner, what did he say? He said, strangers are we, errant at the gates of our own psyche. Right? So when I serve through so avodah zarah, idolatry, is avodah, to serve zarah, through the stranger. Right? In other words, there's an authenticity to my unique unfolding. And so we're together, when we're together in a story of value, I see through that story, and I don't try and keep shifting the story. I mean, there's this major thing, in the kind of human potential new age world. Everyone's always jumping to a new let me learn a new modality. Let me learn a new model. And there's this sense of it. And that's like a new body. It's like it's an inability to kind of locate myself deeply inside and then to see anew. Now, of course, you can keep switching to a new one until you get the best one. That's legitimate. But in the end, I need to basically be placing my attention, my unique attention, my authenticity, that's Gevurah, and then to do it virginally, right? To be madly surprised, right? To let my attention be placed for the very first time and to break the boundary of all yesterdays, right? And to be madly surprised by the inherent newness in the moment. And maybe that's for me, the last thing, which is the nature of the moment. It's why it's true. It's why it works. It's why it's not a psychological trick, but it's the nature of reality, is this moment never existed before.
Yeah. You're making me understand the lines from the Madonna song, "Like a Virgin Touched for the Very First Time," on a whole new level, Mark.
Amen.
So thank you.
Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah for Madonna, right? Right. Yay, Madonna, right? But it's really, I mean, maybe that's a beautiful place, at least for me to close, which is the reason this is true is because every moment is inherently new.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the moment, is that the moment, there's no heresy, right? The only real heresy is to believe that this moment, right, is the same as the previous moment. And if I believe that, then transformation is not possible. The possibility of transformation is that there's a possibility, a chesed, a boundary breaking, available in this moment that has never been available in history before. That's the possibility of hope.
Wow.
Right? Otherwise, we're lost in cycles of repeating violence, right, that become hopeless. So hope is the realization that in the present there's a radical originality, chesed, right? Radical. I can make love in a way that we never have before, right? A radical newness that's ontologically available. That there's an ontology to it. It's real. Like, oh my God, right? Oh my God, right? Chesed and Gevurah, right? We've gotten 2 more steps in the tree of life. What a crazy delight.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's more to say. You just mentioned something about heresy, which I thought was incredibly deep. So, but yeah, let's continue with Tiferet next time, I guess.
We'll pick up. What, do you want to close with something about heresy, my friend? Please don't.
I would know. I just thought what you said was wonderful. Because usually we think of heresy as kind of law related.
Right.
You've broken a law, but it's not so much that it's that we're denying
denying the irreducible, unique, original nature of the moment.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to have no faith in the moment, that this moment can birth new possibility. I've lost faith. I'm a heretic.
Yeah.
What a crazy delight. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, these just keep getting better and better, Mark. Thanks so much.
Oh my God. Shah, do we get to finish with a chant like we usually do? But next time, you promise to bring your guitar next time. Because you didn't do it. Next time, guitar.
I got to buy a guitar. I don't have a guitar at the moment. I have a little ukulele.
You have it available there?
Not right now, no.
All right, next time. I'm going to chant. This time I'll chant. Next time Andrew's responsible. Himmananana, hey ho.